Before I give you a single haircut name, I need to tell you the one mistake that makes every haircut fail. It has nothing to do with which cut you choose. It has nothing to do with your face shape, your hair texture, or your age. Women spend hours researching the perfect haircut and then walk out of the salon looking almost right. Not because they chose wrong, but because they went in with the wrong question. The wrong question is, which haircut makes me look younger? The right question is, which haircut works with what my hair and face are doing right now, in 2026? At this specific life stage? Those sound similar. They produce completely different results. A cut chosen to look younger fights against your hair. A cut chosen to work with your hair at 60 plus looks effortless, alive, and, as a side effect, genuinely younger, not because it's trying to, because it fits. That's what today is about, not the list that every article publishes, the 7 specific cuts that work with mature hair rather than against it, and exactly why each one does. Here's what you're getting in this video. 7 cuts, the real mechanism behind each one. What the eye actually does, what the hair actually does on a mature frame, not adds volume, why it adds volume, not frames the face, how the specific geometry of the cut creates that framing effect. And 2 things I'm flagging right now because they're coming. First, somewhere in the middle of this list, I'm going to tell you that one of the most common pieces of advice women over 60 receive about hair length is wrong. Not outdated, not debatable, wrong, according to the celebrity stylists who work with women in their 60s and 70s daily. Second, there's a cut on this list that works by creating something called a stacking effect at the back of the head. Most women have never heard this term. Most stylists don't explain it. It's the reason some cuts have extraordinary volume and others, cut to the same length, lie completely flat. We're getting there. Welcome back to Style After 60, where we get into the actual why, not just the what. If that's what you're here for, hit subscribe and let's get into the list. Haircut 1. The wedge. Most conversations about haircuts for women over 60 start with bobs. Today we're starting somewhere different, with the cut that builds volume through pure architecture, without relying on product, without relying on heat tools, and without relying on having thick hair to begin with. The wedge. Here's what it is. Precisely. A wedge haircut is shorter at the nape and stacked, meaning the hair is graduated so that each layer sits slightly over the one below it, building upon itself from the neck upward. The top layers are longer. The back layers create a stacked, almost triangular shape. The sides and front sweep forward. And here's the mechanism that nobody explains when they recommend this cut. Hair that lies flat against the head reads as thin, regardless of how much of it there is. Hair that is architecturally stacked away from the head reads as voluminous, regardless of density. A wedge does this structurally. The stacking at the back lifts the hair away from the nape, creating 3-dimensional shape that the eye reads as fullness. You are not adding hair. You are changing the geometry of how the hair sits. The tapered nape is the second mechanism. A close tapered nape elongates the neck visually because it removes the hair that would otherwise sit between the jawline and the shoulder, creating a clean, unbroken line from the jaw to the shoulder. That elongated line reads as elegant. It reads as lifted. It frames the face from below in a way that few cuts do. Celebrity stylist Dylan Creed, of Platinum Age Studio in New York, puts it directly. Stacking at the occipital bone, the rounded bone at the back of the skull, is the structural move that gives a wedge its staying power. That's the specific instruction to give your stylist. Not a wedge, but stacking at the occipital bone. Do this at your next appointment. Tell your stylist you want the graduation to start at the occipital bone and build upward. That precise instruction separates a wedge that holds shape for weeks from one that falls flat in 2. Haircut 2. The tapered pixie bob. Let me tell you what most women get wrong about short hair after 60. They ask for short, and they get flat. They go back and ask for volume, and they get layers that collapse by noon. And nobody explains why. Because the problem isn't the layers, it's where those layers start. The tapered pixie bob solves this with a specific graduation that most short haircuts skip. Here's what it is. The tapered pixie bob flows from a shorter, closely tapered nape upward to longer layers on top. Not layers that are all cut the same distance from the scalp, but a true graduation, where the hair gets progressively longer as it moves from the nape to the crown. That graduation is what creates the height at the crown that reads as volume. Because the longer hair on top can't help but lift away from the head, it has nowhere else to go. Here's the fact that explains why this matters so specifically after 60. Hair follicles shrink with age. That's not a vague statement. It's a measurable change in the diameter of the hair shaft itself. The average hair shaft in your 60s is physically finer than it was in your 30s, which means your hair produces less volume per strand than it once did, when every layer of a short cut is the same length. The thinning at the crown is maximally visible because the cut does nothing to address it, when the crown layers are intentionally longer. When the graduation builds height there specifically, the crown fullness is created architecturally even when the biological density is less than it once was. The cut compensates for what the biology has changed. The feathering around the face is the second half of this cut's mechanism. Feathered pieces around the temples and cheekbones soften the outer edge of the face where the jaw naturally softens with age. Instead of a hard line at the perimeter of the face, there's movement, and movement at the jawline reads as softer, younger, more alive than a hard architectural edge pressed against softer skin. Here's something most women don't know before they sit down for this cut. The word tapered at the nape is doing significant work. A tapered nape sits close and clean against the skin from the hairline upward, creating a visual extension of the neck. That extension makes the neck look longer, the head look more lifted, and the whole silhouette look taller. It's one of the few cuts that actively elongates the neck through how the hair is removed, rather than through how it is styled. Today, look at a recent photo of the back of your head. If the hair at your crown is lying flat rather than sitting with any lift, that's the graduation problem. The tapered pixie bob specifically addresses it without requiring you to go dramatically short everywhere. Haircut 3, the asymmetrical bob. This one surprises people because it doesn't sound like it should work, and then it looks like it always should have. The asymmetrical bob is longer on one side than the other, sometimes subtly, a half-inch difference, sometimes dramatically, a full inch or two. The longer side sweeps forward. The shorter side sits closer to the jaw or even behind the ear. A deep side part creates lift on the longer side. Here's the mechanism, and it's rooted in how the eye reads a face. A perfectly symmetrical frame around a face emphasizes whatever asymmetry exists in the face itself. And here's the thing almost no one says directly. Every face has asymmetry. One eye slightly higher, one cheek slightly fuller, one side of the jaw slightly more defined. In younger skin, this asymmetry is subtle and reads as character. As the face softens with age, natural asymmetry becomes slightly more pronounced, and a perfectly symmetrical haircut, by presenting an even frame on both sides, essentially invites the viewer to notice the unevenness within that frame. An asymmetrical haircut breaks this entirely. The designed asymmetry of the cut draws the eye to the intentional difference in the frame, which means the eye is no longer looking for incidental differences in the face. It's reading the style. There's a secondary mechanism that rarely gets mentioned. The side that is longer naturally creates a visual lean toward that side, a slight diagonal that reads as movement even when the head is perfectly still. Movement reads as alive. Stillness reads as settled. And alive is exactly what youthful hair looks like from across a room. Multiple sources confirm the asymmetrical angled bob is longer in the front, which helps elongate the neck and highlight bone structure, two things that become increasingly valuable as the face changes with time. If you've always worn your hair the same length on both sides because it felt safe, this is the cut that might feel like the biggest risk and deliver the biggest return. Not because risk itself is good, but because the mechanism it uses is genuinely different from anything a symmetrical cut can do. Today, try a deep side part on whichever side you don't normally part. Look at the lift it creates at the crown. Notice whether your face reads differently when the frame around it isn't even. That's the asymmetrical bob showing you its mechanism before the stylist touches anything. Haircut 4. The feathered crop. There's a version of short hair for women over 60 that almost nobody recommends because it got associated with a specific decade, and the association made people forget why it worked in the first place. The feathered crop. Here's what it actually is. Stripped of the decade it got attached to, a feathered crop uses a technique where the ends of the hair are cut at an angle rather than blunt, using a razor or point cutting technique, creating individual pieces that taper to a soft point rather than ending in a flat line. Those tapered pieces create movement. They lift, they separate, they catch light differently at each individual strand rather than creating a single flat surface. The mechanism this creates at the face is specific and worth understanding fully. As the jaw naturally softens with age, the outer perimeter of the face, the zone where the cheek meets the jaw meets the ear, loses some of its earlier definition. A hard-edged haircut at that perimeter creates a stark contrast between the cut's sharp edge and the face's softer edge. The eye is drawn directly to that contrast, which means it's drawn directly to the jaw. A feathered edge at the same perimeter does the opposite. It creates a soft transition that mirrors and complements the face's own softness rather than contrasting with it. The hair and the face are in conversation rather than conflict. Here's the detail that most people don't think about until they've tried this cut. A feathered crop is one of the lowest maintenance short haircuts available. The feathered texture means the cut grows out gracefully, rather than hitting an awkward in-between stage. The pieces at the perimeter simply lengthen naturally, without creating the helmet-like shape that some blunt crops develop between salon visits. If you've avoided shortcuts because of the maintenance commitment, this is the cut that changes that calculation. Celebrity stylist Marcos Diaz describes soft face-framing pieces as creating a youthful, air-light finish, and the feathered crop applies that principle across the entire cut. Not just at the perimeter, every piece is light. The whole cut reads as effortless. Today, run your finger along the ends of your current haircut. If the ends feel blunt and flat, your cut doesn't have feathering. If they feel tapered and slightly pointed, you already have some of this working. Knowing which you have tells you exactly what to ask for at your next appointment. And if you've never given your stylist the instruction to use point cutting or razor cutting on the ends, that single instruction changes the character of almost any haircut you already have. Haircut 5. Long waves with face-framing perimeter layers. Here it is, the one I told you about at the beginning. The advice that is wrong. You have been told, directly or indirectly, through articles or through the general cultural assumption, that long hair ages women over 60, that past a certain point, growing hair out is somehow inappropriate, or that it reads as trying too hard, or that shorter hair is simply the correct and mature and respectable choice. Celebrity stylists are saying the opposite, and they have specific reasons. There is no single rule, says celebrity stylist Marcos Diaz, who works with clients across age groups. It is more about what makes you feel confident and frames your features best. Stylist Jennifer Korab goes further. Shoulder skimming length adds movement and volume, which helps hair look fuller as it naturally thins with age. A length at or below the collarbone with the right layering is not aging. It's one of the most dynamic options available to women over 60. Here's the mechanism that makes long hair work at this life stage, and why it fails without it. Long hair without layering becomes heavy. The weight of length pulls the hair flat against the head, flattening the crown, flattening the sides, and dragging the whole silhouette downward. That downward pull is what reads as aging, not the length itself, but the flat, heavy weight of unlayered length, long hair with perimeter layers. Specifically, layers cut around the face at chin to shoulder length removes that weight while keeping the length. The perimeter layers create the face framing that shorter cuts do at the jaw, but with the movement and versatility that only longer hair offers. Stylists recommend perimeter layers cut in a straight line around the face, specifically because that clean line creates movement without the fragmented, sparse appearance of too many internal layers cutting through already fine hair. The soft wave is the delivery mechanism for all of it. A natural wave, or a loose wave created with a diffuser rather than a curling iron, creates the movement that makes long hair at 60 look effortless rather than effortful. Today, if you've been growing your hair out and feeling uncertain about it, don't cut. Instead, ask your stylist specifically for perimeter layers at chin to shoulder length on your next visit. That single addition may be the difference between length that reads as heavy and length that reads as alive. Haircut 6, the inverted bob. Now the stacking effect I told you about at the beginning. Here it is. The inverted bob, also called the stacked bob, is a cut where the back is cut shorter and stacked upward, while the front pieces are longer and sweep forward toward the chin or jaw. From the back, the cut has a stacked, graduated shape that builds volume from the nape upward. From the front, the longer pieces frame the face. The mechanism is the inverse of what you'd expect. More hair at the back of the head, built upward through stacking, creates a visual counterweight to the face. When the back of the head has architectural volume, the eye distributes attention across the whole head rather than focusing only on the face. That distribution lifts the overall impression. The face reads as one part of a complete considered silhouette rather than the only element competing for attention, the stacking specifically. And this is the detail most explanations skip, works through how light hits a graduated surface versus a flat one. A flat back reflects light in one flat plane. Viewed from the side or slightly behind, it looks like a panel, a stacked. Graduated back reflects light at multiple angles simultaneously, creating depth and dimension that reads as healthy, full hair regardless of the actual density underneath. The architecture is creating the illusion of density that the density itself may no longer be providing. Here's a fact worth holding on to. Studies measuring the perception of hair fullness have consistently found that volume at the back of the head, specifically at the occipital area, influences the perceived overall thickness of hair more than volume at the crown or the sides. The back of the head is the first thing people see when they look at you from across a room or in a passing reflection. The inverted bob specifically engineers volume at that location. Multiple stylists confirm the inverted bob works especially well for fine or thinning hair because the stacking creates shape and dimension that fine hair cannot create on its own. The architecture of the cut does what density once did. Today, if you have a bob and it lies flat at the back with no visible shape when viewed from the side, that's a bob without stacking. Ask your stylist to graduate the back so the hair builds upward from the nape. And use the word stacking specifically. That word tells a trained stylist exactly where the graduation needs to concentrate. Haircut 7, the soft blunt chin bob. The last one, and the one I want to spend the most time on because it contains a mechanism that almost no beauty content about haircuts for women over 60 ever mentions. The soft blunt chin bob. Clean edges. Full or soft layered fringe. Length sitting at or just below the jawline. Every other cut on this list creates movement through graduation, layering, or texture. This one takes the opposite approach entirely, and the reason it works is about light. Hair reflects light. The way it reflects light depends entirely on the shape of the ends. Layered ends scatter light in multiple directions simultaneously. That scattered light creates texture and dimension, which is why layering is recommended for most cuts. But scattered light also creates a slightly diffuse, soft-edged appearance at the perimeter of the hair. Blunt ends reflect light in one clean, unified direction. That unified reflection creates what stylists call a high-shine finish, a clarity at the edge of the hair that makes the entire cut look intentional. Polished. and precisely executed. For women with silver or salt and pepper hair, this distinction matters more than almost any other styling decision. Gray and silver hair already has luminosity. It reflects light more readily than pigmented hair. Blunt ends direct that luminosity in a clean sweep. Layered ends break it up into smaller, disconnected segments. One creates the impression of intentional silver. The other can create the impression of fragmented, patchy gray. The chin length adds the final mechanism. A chin-length bob creates a horizontal line at the jaw, and when the jaw has any natural softening, that horizontal line at the jaw defines it. Not harshly, it simply draws the eye to the jawline and organizes the lower face, creating structure where the face's own natural structure has softened slightly. Celebrity stylist Jennifer Korab confirms that mid-length cuts sitting at or just below the jaw balance features, add volume, and are easy to maintain, but it's the blunt edge specifically, rarely mentioned, highly significant, that transforms a bob from pleasant to striking, particularly on silver and gray hair. Today, look at the ends of your hair in direct light. Blunt ends create a clean line you can trace with your eyes. Layered ends create a soft, feathered edge. Neither is wrong. But if you have silver or gray hair and it has always looked slightly muted rather than luminous, blunt ends might be the single change that makes the most visible difference. Here's the single thing that connects all 7 of these cuts. None of them are trying to make you look younger. Every one of them is doing something specific and mechanical. Architectural stacking, feathered edges, asymmetric framing, perimeter layers, blunt light reflection, graduated tapering. They produce a result that reads as younger not because they are disguising anything, but because they are working with what your hair and face are doing right now, in 2026, at this exact stage of your life. There's a question worth asking yourself before your next salon appointment. What is your hair doing right now that you're fighting? Is it thinning at the crown? Is it growing in with more texture than it used to have? Is it sitting flat where it used to have body? Every one of those things is a variable to work with, not a problem to overcome. The wedge works with flatness. The tapered pixie bob works with crown thinning. The feathered crop works with a softer jaw perimeter. The soft blunt chin bob works with silver and gray luminosity. They're all working with something real. The cut that fights your hair looks like a fight. The cut that works with your hair looks like you woke up like that. That's the whole principle. 7 different applications of the same idea. 7 cuts. The wedge that creates volume through architecture. The tapered pixie bob that solves the crown with graduation. The asymmetrical bob that turns intentional asymmetry into the most flattering framing tool in the kit. The feathered crop that softens the face's perimeter through technique. Not length, long waves with face framing perimeter layers. Yes, long hair. Because the rule that said otherwise was always wrong, and celebrity stylists have been saying so for years. The inverted bob whose stacking creates volume through light reflection at the back of the head, and the soft, blunt chin bob whose clean edges make silver and gray hair luminous rather than muted. You don't need to choose the cut that sounds the most youthful. You need to choose the cut that was designed for your specific hair, your specific face, the specific life you're living right now. Go back to your stylist with the name and the mechanism. Not just, I saw something I liked. Tell them what you want the cut to do, where you want the volume, what you want the light to do at the perimeter, whether you want feathering or blunt edges, whether you need graduation at the crown or architecture at the back. That conversation, that specific informed conversation gets you a result that looks exactly like what you pictured, rather than a result you spend the drive home trying to talk yourself into accepting. That knowledge is yours now. Use it. If this gave you something real, give it a like and subscribe to Style After 60 for more of this every single week. And tell me in the comments, which of these 7 changes what you thought you knew about haircuts after 60? Which one are you bringing to your stylist? I read every comment. Let's find your cut together.